be on. Oh, beautiful. All right. Would love it if you guys are willing to be on video, but that's okay if not. This session is going to be very interactive. So I hope you guys are ready for that on this Wednesday evening. I'm going to ask you to get ready. I've designed it right this way because, we've had sessions around how to think about thriving, and now we need to see if we are. And so we need to figure out how things are going. And so I want you guys to grab a piece of paper and a pen. You obviously can do like typing digitally, but I really prefer handwriting. I'm literally going to ask you to reflect on a lot of different things throughout the session, and it's going to help you figure out where you're at and where you want to improve in your internship. So grab that piece of paper and a pen, and I'm gonna share my screen. So let me do that. And then I'm gonna open up the chat. So if you guys have any questions, I will be able to see it all here. And I'm gonna move your video so I can see everyone. Okay, hold on one sec. Let me just get this all bigger on my screen. Okay, here we go. So, all right, so we're gonna dive in. You can see my screen, correct? Okay, all right, you guys know who I am, so I'm gonna skip over that. Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna review a few of these core areas. There's professionalism, there's project management, there's communication, there's expectations, there's networking and career clarity, documentation, and your goals and your learnings. There's so much that goes into yes, I believe you will get the recording. Okay, good. I'm paying attention to the chat. So there's so much that goes into thriving during your internship, right? We're going to go through all of these different areas. All right. So I want you to start writing. I'm going to literally prompt you guys with these thoughts and these questions, but jot down the keywords that come to your mind. You don't have to write full sentences, but I'm going to give you 20, 30 seconds on each of these questions just to see the top keywords that you start to think of, okay? So A, what does professionalism actually mean to you? If you had to start to like define it or describe some keywords that come to your mind, what do you actually think the sort of ideal definition to you would be if you had to describe how to be professional and or portray a sense of professionalism? What are some words that come to your mind? And feel free to write in the chat as well. I'm happy to have you guys handwrite, but would love to also see your thoughts. If you want to, instead of handwriting, you want to use the chat, that's another good way. But at the very least, want you guys to be actively thinking of it, whether you're sharing it or you're writing it down. And once you start to think about what professionalism actually means to you, I want you to start to jot down, what are you positively portraying, right? How are you doing a good job? Oh, I love this, Delilah, polite, reserved, confident. I love that. So how are you showing up as a professional? Are you doing anything that's actually like, it's one thing when we talk about thriving in the internship. Now all of a sudden you're there. And so sometimes you're just showing up and it's like, now is a great moment to reflect on, how are you showing up? So I want you to start with the positive. Anna, great. Appearance, work ethic, punctuality. Amazing. I love these keywords so much. I want you guys to think about, like, what are you doing well in order to show up as a professional, to show that professionalism, dressing the part. I love that. So keep reflecting on what you're doing well to actually feel like you are giving this presence of professionalism, and jot these things down. And then once you feel like you've done that, consistency, I love that. Amazing. Being punctual, so good. This is so good. Communicating promptly, yes. Amazing, amazing. These are so good. Now, where could you improve a little bit? So this is gonna take, I'm gonna give you like sufficient time for this one. Having bedside manners, I love that. Where could you improve? So is there anything standing out to you? Maybe there was one instance where you could have done something a little better or differently, or maybe there's something on a regular basis that you feel like you've noticed, but maybe you haven't done anything about, or maybe there's some situation that always happens that you're not sure how to handle. It could be something that's already happened, or something that may happen. It could be something you feel. Being more proactive, yes, about things I don't like, following directions more efficiently. Anything else for goals of where to improve along professionalism? These are really good ones. Getting along with people I don't like better. Delilah, welcome to the workplace. Um, Look, it's interesting, right? You're starting to see why the workplace is such a weird place to be. There's any number of personalities following the rules. It's true. There's a balance. There's rules, there's personalities. We've got to navigate all this stuff. It's not easy. So it's okay to identify these areas, right? Is there something you're not sure about, right? As it relates to being a professional or showing your sense of professionalism, right? Is there something you're not sure how to do, how to ask, how to say? Is there anything you're not sure about? Dealing with difficult people. Get ready, Leora, because that's what we do here at work. We're all kind of difficult in our own way, some more than others, but people are difficult because people are complex. And that's why we have to really be thoughtful about how we communicate, how we listen, how we ask, how we be clear. You're starting to see the workplace is a complex place. Okay, good. So now I would love if anyone's willing to unmute. If you have any examples, a challenge, something as it relates to professionalism, it could be something that's positive, a tip or something that has helped you. It could be a win, something you did well, or it could be a question or a challenge. Is there anyone who wants to share anything that comes to mind with professionalism that they want to bring up as a point of discussion? You don't have to tell every detail, but would love to hear any examples as a way of giving you guys a little guidance and working through, what we could do to work through that example. Any challenges, questions, or positive things? It could be a win, could be a tip, as it relates to being a professional. Any examples or stories that somebody might want to share?
Yeah, I have one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a trouble. I said it in the chat earlier, like being able to find initiative without being pushing the boundary, without being too pushy. And, like my role is to really be an observer. And I want to be more involved. So it's kind of hard to maintain that balance.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think you could do if you had to just initially brainstorm around like how to kind of handle this the next time it arises?
Usually I just don't I'd rather like be on the safe end. So, even if I want to ask a question, I, wait for like a private moment to ask a doctor or something, like not, in front of everyone if they're having a meeting or something.
Right. Well, look, it depends on the size of meeting sometimes. And so if it's a really big meeting and there's a lot of moving parts and people are talking quickly, and it maybe even it's an hour meeting, but all of a sudden it's like jam packed. Like if it doesn't feel like there's room, I think it's okay to reserve your question for a later time, a private, after the meeting, one-on-one. You can definitely jot down your questions and you can definitely ask those questions as long as you are finding another time to do it. The last thing we want is you don't ask at all. But it's okay that you're thinking about what's the right setting for when and where to speak up. That's okay. You're doing the right thing to even think about that. And I think erring on the side of caution doesn't hurt. But look, if there's a meeting where it's less people, maybe it's a little slower. Maybe you just kind of get a sense that they're brainstorming and it's not as urgent. Maybe it's not as senior people. Like you kind of need to gauge, like, would it be okay for me in this meeting to speak up? Maybe you wait towards the end, of the meeting. That might be okay, right? So for all of you guys, I would try to challenge yourself a little bit with how can I find the balance, gain a little bit of that courage and confidence and build up the ability to do it. But it is a balance. There's no right, perfect answer. It does depend on the scenario. But I think if you're thinking about like the length of the meeting, who's in the meeting, how quickly are they talking? Is it urgent or is it like slower paced? And maybe speaking up towards the end if it feels like they're slowing things down and you have a little time. Those are some of the things I would think about with like when and if to speak up. Does that help? When given an unclear goal and task, to clarify and achieve it for the boss with minimal questions. Delilah, interesting. Look, I think the minimal questions piece, you don't have to have minimal questions. You can have a lot of questions, because as an intern, I will safely say most of these internships, they're not expecting you to come in feeling like the expert. It's okay to have a lot of questions. I think you just want to be thoughtful about like, if you were to go to your manager and say like, do you have 5 to 10 minutes? Because I have a list of different questions for you. And that way you're sort of bulking it together, making it easier for them versus like every 5 minutes you're sending a message, right? Which maybe they're okay with that too. As long as you're asking like, what's your preference for how often and where I send you my questions, and bulking the questions never really hurts, right? So it's okay to ask everything you need to ask, because every question is a good question. And I mean that. I know that sounds fluffy, but the reason I say that is because if it's in your head, it's going to help you to deliver on whatever it is they're asking you. So I'd rather you ask it and hear the answer, but just be thoughtful about like what's the best place and time to do it. But again, that being said, don't just wait like days on end, right? I would say once a day, it's okay to email your list of questions or ask for a 5-10 minute phone call. You don't want to not ask, right? That's the key. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to keep going. Let me reshare my screen quickly. Hold on one second. Here we go. So, okie dokie, beautiful. All right, we're going to keep going. Project management. Okay. So again, I want you guys to start writing some keywords, or of course you can use the chat. We're going to go one by one. Have you clearly been tracking your to-dos, due dates, and project status? And this could be a yes, no, maybe. This could be, I've done well, I've done okay, or I haven't done as well as I should have. So write in the chat or write down on your paper, how have you been doing around just simply tracking your to-dos and when they're due? How have you been doing in terms of tracking your to-dos? Okay. Have you been able to adequately figure out how to approach and achieve your projects? Now, again, you can take as much time as you need to do that, but have you been able to reach the point of at least understanding the approach that you may take on a project, and then secondarily achieving the project? This is the core, this is the meat, this is the work, this is you asking questions, understanding it, being able to deliver, right? And it's okay if there's a struggle or a challenge. It's very, I would say, expected with any intern that there's a level of trying to figure things out with your manager and asking those questions and learning. That's okay. But we just want to make sure you're asking those questions and you're seeing progress and you're moving the needle, right? Have you met deadlines? Now, let me just say, in the workplace, deadlines often shift. They often move. But if somebody gave you a deadline and you understood how long that thing might take, and were you asking enough questions to be able to meet it, right? There are times where you might have been given an unreasonable deadline. So there's any number of scenarios and complexities and nuances here. But generally, have you been able to either meet the deadline or at least speak up if it wasn't possible? Have you provided regular updates, proactive updates to whoever it is that's above you, a manager, whoever it may be? I personally I'll just say as a manager, I like a daily update, but it really depends on how involved your manager is and how much they need to hear and how often they want to hear how you're doing and what you're doing. Have you been resourceful? Have you been able to find resources on your own, doing research, looking at documents within the company that they already have? Resourcefulness, asking peers for help. Or are you just immediately jumping to asking your manager, right? Where could you improve as it relates to project management? And I'm going to take a little bit of time on this one, and I want to hear in the chat Is there something where you feel like you could strengthen your project management? And again, this is the bread and butter of the internship. It's being given a task and achieving it, hopefully, right? Is there anything that stands out to you as an area for improvement, area for opportunity? Feel free to write in the chat if there's something you're going to work on. And is there anything you're not sure about? Is there something you're not sure how to do it? If you're like, I don't know how to do project management, maybe there's just something you're not sure of how to approach it, right? That's okay. But identifying it is key. Anyone have a story, a question, a challenge, a tip, a hack, a win, anything as it relates to project management that you can share? And this is a great time to get that feedback of where you need help, because I'm here directly listening to your stories. So you're getting coaching right here and now. Anything project management wise that you guys could use a little support on, question, challenge, tip, hack, win, progress. You could share anything that's, hopefully these reflections are sparking something. So anyone want to share something that we can learn from today as it relates to project management? Working on not getting frustrated when I'm unable to figure something out on my own. That's a really good one, Caitlin. It's amazing because, first of all, it makes perfect sense. You guys are probably given tasks every day that you've never done before. It's completely valid that you'd be like, what am I doing? That's a normal feeling. Daily lists have definitely helped me manage my short-term goals. I love that, Carla. Once you figure out what works for you, just keep running with it. And if you haven't figured out what works for you to stay organized, tweak it. Try something different. The key with a lot of these things is experimentation. If you didn't try a to-do list, try it. If you didn't try a project management tool, figure out like what's the one thing that you think would help. Try it. And if it doesn't work, you keep tweaking it. Still working on how to manage long terms. So that's a really good point, short term versus long term. Carla, my quick thoughts on long term is we've got to break it down, right? So if you're thinking about a daily list, try a different kind of list where it's like, say the long-term thing is due in a month or two. You want to break it down into like phases, right? So maybe in 1 week sprints or 1 to 2 week sprints, like what would happen if you had to reverse engineer and backtrack to say, what are the different things that would need to happen in order to achieve this goal in 2 months' time? Right? In a nutshell, that's kind of how I would think about longer term project management. Caitlin and Carla, do you want to share just any next steps? I know I just gave you a few ideas, but anything, feel free to unmute. Any next steps you think you might try to work through these challenges? I'm giving you the answers, right? Okay. Caitlin, I want to make sure I tackled yours fully. Getting frustrated. This one's important, right? Typing in a loud place. Okay, no problem. So Caitlin, I just want to come back quickly to this because emotions are real and you're human and it's okay to have frustration and that's normal. What I would say is like noticing the feeling, right? Like the first thing you can do is recognize when you feel frustrated. And to be perfectly honest, if you're feeling frustrated, I would just step away. Like, I don't want you to really ever have to do work when you're feeling that way. So take a minute, take a breather. Okay, good, Caitlin, got it. And the thing I would think about with the emotions here, I love Headspace for 1 minute, 3 minute meditations. So you could try that. I'm giving you like one tip, but really figure out like what you need, but like a quick walk away from the computer. I know it's like, wow, could we ever think about walking away from the computer? Right? Or if you're in person at the office, you could still get up, go get a drink of water if you're in an office setting. Noticing that feeling is key, and then being able to step away. Like, truthfully, even if something feels urgent, if you're not in a good headspace, I would really, really, really recommend, and I'm sure your managers would say the same, to try to just take a breather and come back to it when you can be a little bit more level-headed. And that, again, that same thing goes for even when it feels urgent. One of my weird strengths personally was being composed in sort of like chaotic situations. And I don't know why, it just happened. but I can safely say not necessarily always easy to do. If you don't feel like that's a natural thing for you, it might just take a little bit of practice, but that's okay. This is why we do this, because the self-awareness is so critical to everything else. Trying to utilize Excel sheets or Google Sheets instead of physical lists. This way I can track or color code my long-term goals and projects. Carla, I love that. I mean, I'm the biggest Google Sheets fan. It's so customizable that you can make it your own. And I just really, really encourage it. I love, especially because A, you're going to document it in a transparent space. You could share it with somebody and then they could actually help you and they could see it. It's just a beautiful thing. It's a really clean slate for you to type exactly what you need to type about that project. And yes, look at that pre-made to do. That's exactly what I was just going to say. Google Sheets, like, I wonder if they have templates for project management, right? So you could just look at like what they have as a way of giving you ideas. Because if you insert a template for project management, maybe you didn't even think to write like, oh, due date, status, stakeholder, like there's any number of fields that may help you. Lunch break is your saving grace. Try not to show it, but it's hard to focus when you're frustrated. I will try to step away more. I totally understand. I mean, it makes sense. It doesn't, but I'm glad you're going to step away, and I'm glad, you know, again, lunch breaks are key. I love that. Google Sheets for the win. Amazing. Beautiful. Okay, I'm going to keep going, guys. This is great. All right, communication. Okay, so what's going well? Are you verbally communicating well? And when I say verbally or orally, what I mean is written, verbally or written communication. Those are the same things. So you know what I mean here. Are you writing well? When you have to write a message, when you have to write an email, are you being clear? Do people understand what you're saying? Or when you have to maybe get on a Zoom, or you get on the phone, or you're just simply in person, are you being clear when you're asking questions, when you're giving updates? Sometimes in the early days of a career, it takes a little practice. You might send an email draft, you might get feedback from a peer, or when you're orally communicating, you might practice it before you actually go say it. That's okay. It's not a matter of memorizing. It's just getting comfortable with like, how can I phrase this? Let me be a little thoughtful before I walk up to the manager. That's okay, right? Have you been asking enough questions? Okay, we've talked about questions, but I cannot say enough. Don't hold back. If you have questions, email your questions. Even if you had to send a bulk, here are 10 questions, or you can use Google Docs, allow your manager to write in the notes, or maybe it's a phone or a Zoom. You can bulk your questions, but just don't not ask your questions. Have you been providing frequent updates? We've kind of talked about that, but that's part of communication, proactive, frequent, regular updates. Have you been clear in your message of what you're trying to say? And where could you improve? So if anyone's willing to share in the chat any areas that they think they can improve on with communication, what's a challenge? What hasn't been going as well? Area for opportunity here. Or is there something you're not sure about? Something you're not sure you know how to do? Anything you can improve on as it relates to communication. I'll give you guys a few seconds to think about it. It's hard to be concise. Yep, it is. I would, with being concise, I would just take your time. If it means that you sit there with an email draft for 20 minutes, or maybe it's too long for an email. So maybe sometimes you don't have to be concise. It depends on the purpose, right? Are you trying to ask a quick question, or is it better for a Google Doc, or is it better for some sort of project management documentation where maybe you need to list out all the questions, or maybe you need to list out a lot of detail? It really depends, Delilah, right? So think about what's the scenario and what form of communication would be the right place to put this based on the level of information I need to share, right? Or I would just simply take your time to craft it if you feel like you could be more concise and say the same thing. I have to write pitches for reporters at times, or pitching a company. Hard to write about something I don't know the ins and outs of. That makes a lot of sense, Sammy. I think asking for examples is important. I also think asking for, like, if you haven't already done this, like, what is their suggested process that you take? And if they suggest that you spend a day reading about that industry, like that's up to them to tell you how much time to spend to get up to speed. And then once they give you the suggested amount of time, of course, you're just simply going to do your best and you're going to ask them for feedback. I mean, there are some just simple limitations of like, there's only so much time they're going to tell you that you should spend just simply learning, right? But I would ask for how other interns have done it. What are the tips in the process to learn quickly, to get up to speed? And what amount of time would they like for you to spend on that, right? Many questions can sound redundant, or I feel like I'm being confusing. Yes. It's interesting. So if it sounds redundant, but it's not, then I think you're right. Maybe you're not explaining clearly the difference between your two questions. So Delilah, I would really think about, are you asking these things verbally or are you writing it down? For someone like yourself, I might think about potentially writing. It sounds like maybe you're asking these things verbally. Writing can be a really cool exercise to make sure that you're actually just wordsmithing the thing and you're sitting there and it's an exercise and it's actually kind of prompting you to say, what am I trying to say here? And that's an exercise and that's okay. You could sit there with a blank email and you don't need to sit there for hours, but sometimes writing can make it easier to be clear. But if you have to say it in person or in a phone or in Zoom, I would just try to do your best to practice it if you can, prepare those questions ahead of time if you can. But if it's more like in the moment, try to just slow down your speech. I know that sounds weird, but like it's the same as if you were to do an interview. How can you be really thoughtful? You see how I'm slowing down the pace that I'm talking right now? It's allowing me to think better while I'm talking so that I can choose the best words to get my message across. So that takes some practice to get used to, but it's a really trusty tool. People are not going to notice, oh, you're talking slower. They're going to say, wow, you're being really thoughtful. And you're going to give your brain time to choose your words. So slow down. For those who work with their own computer, create a separate profile on Google Chrome. It helps a ton. Sammy, what do you mean by that? Like, what does it help you to do? You can unmute if you want. Minimize distractions. Okay, I like that. Yes. If we can be creative with what windows do you have open or not. I mean, of course, distraction is a whole other topic. But yeah, we could get into that. You can bookmark all the work needed. Yes, I love that. Amazing. Okay, I'm gonna keep going, but let's keep this all in mind. Communication is really important. Okay, so feedback, expectation setting. Okay, are my performance expectations clear? If you are still confused as to what you need to be doing or how you need to be showing up or how you need to be performing or what you need to be delivering, I would ask like immediately. So make sure the expectations are clear. If you're not sure what's expected of you, how are you going to be delivering? And by the way, it might have been on them. Maybe they didn't make it clear. But if you're still confused, ask, and ideally write it all down. Okay. Have you been meeting and exceeding your expectations, right? That's predicated on understanding what the expectations are. Have you been meeting or exceeding expectations for the projects? There might be a different set of expectations, whereas like one simple project, you have to do A, B, and C. Whereas overall in the internship, maybe they want to see, certain things just from you generally. Have you been soliciting feedback? Meaning, have you asked your manager, how am I doing? Where can I improve? I know it's kind of a weird, scary thing to say, but try it. Try your hand at it. See how you can get comfortable with it. Hold on, I want to make sure we're all good. I was hearing some background noise. Okay, so what positive and constructive feedback have you received, right? So what are they giving you that positive feedback? And if not, by the way, when you ask for feedback, you can say, what am I doing well? What am I need to improve on? You can ask for both. You should ask for both. It's a good way to get this outside opinion. That way in future interviews, when they're like, what are your strengths? You can think about what other people have told you. What have they noticed, right? What are you great at? So what have you received and where could you improve? So I would say the level of improvement here is if you don't know your expectations or if you haven't asked for feedback, or if you're not sure if you're meeting those expectations, right? Or if you know that you're meeting them but not exceeding them, right? So there's any number of ways to improve here. Anyone have thoughts around questions they may have, challenges they may face, or wins in progress of what they've been doing well as it relates to getting feedback and meeting expectations and setting expectations as well? Anything you want to share in the chat of how you relate to this and maybe some challenges and where you can improve? I'll give you guys a few seconds, but I want to hear some stories, some examples, some challenges, some questions, because this is important. And it's one of those uncomfortable ones. No one wants to necessarily have a feedback conversation, or it takes a rare being to say, I want to have the feedback conversation. So might not be your first thing to want to go do, but I want you to at least once over the course of your internship, if not twice, try to say, what have I been doing well? What could I do better? Anyone have thoughts they want to share in the chat? Questions, challenges, something that's been helpful, something you're not sure about? I've never done it. It sounds really beneficial to directly ask. Good. I'm glad you see that. It really is. I mean, let's think about it. Directly asking anything is probably the best way to ask, right? A challenge might be that it's awkward. You're right. It is, but it's also okay. I want you to be, selfish is the wrong word here, but you want to learn from this. You want to learn about yourself. This is the best way of doing it. If you don't ask, you're not going to know. And guess what? If you do ask, they're going to be so impressed. They're going to want to call you back for next summer, next internship, next job, whatever it may be. They're going to be like, wow, this person is really interested in growing and developing. Look, you need to look at yourself and say, am I comfortable hearing feedback? Takes a bit of strength. It does. But I would really encourage you to try it. Seeking self-improvement. Yes, Carla, I love it. What's the worst that happens? They're going to give you some constructive feedback and they're going to say, well, when you do this, it'd be a little better if you could try it this way or whatever, right? Though they might give you some ideas. They might give you some suggestions or tips. So that's really the worst case scenario here, is that they give you some constructive things you can do a little better or differently. But this one takes, the strength, right? It's the emotional work here. Anything else you guys want to share with feedback? Any challenges, questions? What if we are providing feedback to our peers? How would you word things in a more respectful manner? Great question. I would word it like, first of all, you can say to a peer, do you want some feedback? Or is it okay if I share some feedback? Or is it okay if I share a perspective on, your project or something like that? You can ask. Okay, so that's a great place to start. The next one might be something like, I noticed, or I observed, or in my observation, or in my perspective, like, this is your observation. So they might have intended something that came out differently. So you're sharing your perception. And then you could say what it is that you perceived. And then you could say, next time, I'd be curious if you'd be open to trying A, B, and C. And maybe you give an idea. Or you can say, make it a question. You could say something like, I noticed A, B, and C. Did you mean for that to be, or was that your sort of, hope or goal? Or I just want to understand more about your approach, or turn it into a question. Those are the things I would think about. Oh, wow. Okay. Anna. Yes, 7 hours ahead. Yes. Yep. They've been instances where call me at 2 p.m. with a task due at 8. Yep. Oh, wow. Yep. Okay. Anna, I think you have a few different questions here. Like, if you're, first of all, the quick answer is this considered part of work time? So basically what Anna's asking is, if I'm working late at night, is this part of work time? So like, the answer is yes. But the second piece of this is, I would, urgently, immediately encourage you to ask your managers and just say, when I get a task from you, and give this example. I would literally just say, for example, if you give me something around 2 p.m. and it's due at 8, are you okay if I do this work between these hours? I would literally just ask. That's flat out. Now, every single internship works a little differently in terms of how you're going to log those hours and the payment, and if you're getting compensated or not, or whatever it may be. So if you have logistical questions about like that, I would just kind of directly ask that sooner rather than later. What I want you guys to realize is that it is your manager's job to answer a lot of these things, right? And so if you're not sure, it's okay to ask it. Now, your job is to say, how can I communicate clearly and in a professional way? Okay, but Anna, that's a really valid question. I would just literally almost straight up give them that example, and then any logistical questions you have of like, do you want me to do this during this time frame, or what's the best way of updating you, or how can I best share the expectations around when I think I can get this done, right? It depends what your questions are related to the example, but I want you guys to remember that like your managers are there to, like, you don't have to like have the answer to it, right? So if you're not sure about something, it is their job to help fill in the gaps of like, what is the expectation here, right? Does that make sense, guys and gals? Okay, all right, let's keep going. Networking, mentorship, career path clarity. Okay, so have you been networking with people outside of the organization or in the organization? Networking meaning you set up an informational meeting, you were just looking to learn from them about their role or their career path or their, any number of professional questions you may have for them. Have you been networking? Have you gained learnings, insights, or clarity on your future career path? And part of that is probably just already happening because you're doing the project work that's being given to you, but are you reflecting on whether that's work you're interested in? Are you reflecting on how it might relate to you? Are you reflecting on whether you want to do this in the future? What's going well regarding your networking? And jot these things down. You can also share in the chat, but I want you at the very least writing on your piece of paper. And where could you improve? So I'd love to see some comments in the chat around what questions you may have or challenges or positive things you can share as it relates to any networking you've done, or any clarity you've gotten as it relates to your career path. So I'll give you guys a few seconds to think about it, and would love to see some comments or questions in the chat. Questions, challenges, stories, or positive things to share. Have we been networking? And you could say anything. I want you guys to be honest. Maybe you're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know who to ask. I don't know what to do on these meetings. I don't know why I need to do it. Networking does help me see different professional paths more clearly. Carla, I love that. Amazing. Dina, I meet with this supervisors and I always make it a point to exchange contact information. Great. Definitely gather the contact information, and better yet, you can connect with them on LinkedIn. I'd be curious how those meetings are going. And look, if you're meeting with people already for project work, obviously you're going to be talking about like whatever the work is, but just don't be afraid to set up a separate meeting and say to them, I'd love to learn about your career path and your role and your work and learn from you as it relates to my career, development. That could be a separate meeting outside of what you're already doing when you're working with all these different people, right? That's what I mean by networking, right? It's like an informational mentor kind of a meeting where you're simply learning from someone. Nice to know firsthand how people got to where they are. I love it. Anyone else have questions, comments, challenges, examples, stories, wins with networking and career path clarity? If there's not something you're not sure of, would love to hear anything on your mind so that we can help you feel comfortable. Not sure what to talk about. So Delilah, networking, and I would say go back to, I think one of our prior meetings, we might have went over it, but actually, I think I have a slide here. Actually, I'm going to just show you right now. So first of all, you want to understand who you can connect with and what you can do in the meeting, right? So that's what you're asking. You want to learn about their role. You want to learn about their team. You might even want to learn about their department. You want to connect the dots. You want to use this as an understanding about how their work relates to the team that you're on. Building mentor relationships for the future. If you get along really well with somebody and they're helpful, you might meet with them once a quarter. You might meet with them twice a year. You might meet with them again later as you continue to grow as a professional. You want to gain key tips about thriving in that company and in your career in general. If their role is interesting to you, you want to dive into the work and example projects and the skills that they suggest you think about. It's a really good way of getting a glimpse into, is that a role I might want to do, right? You're learning, right? That's really, in essence, you're learning, okay? Of course, how will you reach out? Topics you can ask about. Okay, here, down here, right? Role, projects, functions, skills, strategies, challenges, opportunities with their work, the teams they interact with, their path up until that point, how people break in, their future direction, the industry, the players, the innovators, the competitors, the trends. So these are just some ideas, but you want to learn as much as humanly possible. You want to be a sponge. And then by way of that meeting, you're just simply building a relationship as well as learning, right? Does that make sense? Any other questions you guys have about networking? Okay. So documentation, I'm just such a big fan of documentation. Being organized to me is one of the most fundamental baselines of becoming a professional, right? Have you been staying organized? Have you been tracking things like your questions? Maybe you have a list of questions. Have you clearly tracked your ideas? Have you been documenting what you've accomplished, right? Have you been feeling organized and staying organized? People can sense when that's not the case. And getting organized is going to help you just focus during the meetings that you have, so that you can focus on the work, right? Versus like finding your information, right? If it's all over the place. Where could you improve? I want to hear in the chat if you have any challenges, questions, or tips and hacks around organization. I know Sammy was sharing one already. Where are you finding challenges around staying organized, and what are some tips that works well for you? Anything you guys can share in the chat? Anything that's getting in your way, anything that's not serving you, anything, if it's not keeping you organized or if it's not keeping you on track, you'll probably know, right? If you're like, say that you were going to use a to-do list and then you're not using it, right? If you're either not using a tool or if you're using it, but it's not doing its job, right? Is there anything that's getting in your way? Anything that's not feeling as organized as it could be? Or again, always welcome the tips of what does work for you. My job uses a Monday board. Okay, cool. Monday is one of those sites. There's Asana, there's Trello, there's Basecamp, there's Google Sheets you could even use if you wanted to. There's so many different project management tools. Oftentimes they do have like a free tier. So absolutely, if you feel like it would help you, test it out. The beauty of the tools is that it kind of gives you some ideas. Like you might say, what's the priority? What's the due date? All of a sudden you're like, oh, I should track this. My desk calendar helps a lot. I like physically writing my to-dos down. Love that. Once you know what works for you, just keep doing it. If it's not yet working, experiment, try something different. You can also ask your peers what works for them. Peers at the internship or peers, of course, in this community. See what works for other people. Anything else we can share? Any challenges, questions, tips around staying organized? All right, I'll keep going. Your goals and your learning. Are you clear on what your original goals were going into this internship? Are you keeping them top of mind? Are you keeping them in front of your computer on a Post-it? And are you meeting those goals, right? If you remember a few weeks ago, we spoke about, what do you want out of this? Are you on track? What have you been learning? What haven't you learned as much about that you would like to? It's okay to voice that to a manager and say, is there a way I could get a little more involved with this or shadow some meetings around this topic? Or, is there a resource you could give me so I could read up on this thing? Where can you improve, right? This is the moment where we want to ask ourselves, what are your goals? and what are you learning? And where can we improve? Anyone want to share in the chat any questions, challenges, tips, or wins around meeting your own goals as well as what you're learning? I'll give you some time to reflect on this and want to see it in the chat if I can. Are your goals top of mind? Are they clear and visible and somewhere easy that you can find them? That's step one, right? We set those goals. Are we referring to them? I would refer to your own personal goals like at least once a week, just to say, okay, what can I do this week at my internship to make sure I'm getting out of this what I want to? That might relate to networking. It might relate to, remember a few weeks ago, we were saying confidence, right? Any goal that you set, whether it's what you wanted to learn, what you wanted to, hone as a skill, whether it's hard skills or soft skills, we want to just simply make sure those aren't just goals that we set, but that things that we're actually using, right? It's okay to remember how we talked about asking for feedback. If you wanted feedback as it relates, if one of your goals was working on your communication or confidence, that's also a way you could ask for feedback. You could say, I'm working on this goal, like, how am I doing? You're starting to get a glimpse of how in the workplace, in an ideal world, you'll start to have meetings with a manager where they're actually helping you improve. That's, in an ideal world, what a manager would be doing. And if they're not doing it, you're going to kindly make it easier for them to help you, right? How are you guys doing as it relates to your goals and your learnings? Share in the chat so I can see how you think you're doing. And if you feel like you're not on track with those goals, what are you going to do next? What's a good next step? Might it be redrafting the goals or just digging them up? Might it be speaking up about something you want to learn more about? What can you do to improve if you're not already feeling on track? And feel free to unmute if anyone wants to share. This one seems like a hard one, so that's okay. But just because it's a harder question doesn't mean, right, we're going to just maybe for the sake of this session, we'll skip over it in a minute or two. But I want you guys to just reflect on this in the sense of like, do I know what I want out of this? Do I know what I want to grow and develop as myself? And do I know what I want to learn, right? It's not just that you're giving them your value, but you're taking and you're growing and you're learning. So make sure that they're helping you grow in the areas that you want to, right? It's here for you guys as well, right? This internship. Okay. Okay. So let's do some quick breakouts. We're going to talk about 2 to 3 actionable takeaways that you will implement, change, or try. Would this be a weekly goal or check up on ourselves, Carla? I think weekly is good, but like to be perfectly honest, if you checked in once a day on this, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. So Carla, you can actually ask yourself, like, on what frequency do I want to check in on my own goals? And if you want to do that every day, it's not going to hurt. But you don't want to feel like it's like a pressure thing, right? So don't, if doing it every day is going to be stressful, you don't need to do it every day. But like at least once a week, I would say, looking at your own goals that you set for this internship wouldn't hurt. Because if you just were to remind yourself, oh, I wanted to network with professionals or I wanted to learn this skill, it's just a good reminder. That way it's going to remind you to say, oh, let me speak up. Let me ask my manager for a little help, or let me, it's going to prompt you to say, what do I need to do to achieve this goal, right? It's going to prompt that focus, right? Okay, good. Okay, beautiful. I'm going to do some super quick breakouts. Did you guys, Michael, want to do it in a specific way?
Yeah, I have them all put together. So whenever you're ready.
Okay, so the prompt for you guys in the breakouts, I want you to jot it down on paper, but you can also share with each other 2 to 3 actionable takeaways from today's session that you're actually going to put in place, something tangible, something practical, something you're going to actually try or do a little bit better or differently, right? Something given our reflection today. I want you guys to share with each other. So we're good to go. We'll give you a few minutes on those breakout rooms, okay?
All right. Have fun, everyone.
Or unmute to share your takeaways. I would love to hear any next steps that you guys are going to put in place from today that you reflected on, that you want to try, something you want to do better or differently. Feel free to write in the chat or unmute. Any next steps you guys want to share? Would love to hear it. Anything you're going to put in place, anything you're going to try to do better and differently. One thing, would love to see some comments. We talked about time management with Google Sheets. Love that. Awesome. Time management is huge. We could have a whole session on that. Time management is a big one. Anything else? Any other next steps you guys are going to try or work on? I appreciate your participation, Sammy. I think just recording what I do, because I do so many different things, I forget. Yeah, that's a great one. I mean, Delilah, we're going to want to add this to your resume, your LinkedIn profile. We need to jot down all the work, all the projects, all the achievements. I would really encourage you guys always document what you're working on and the outcomes and the specifics of how you're doing it. You're going to need this to represent all the great work that you've done within your personal branding materials. We all agree that we needed to network more. Yes, yes, Carla, I love that. Work on being better at referring to my original goals. I love that. Clear goal in mind and understand what it's going to take to get there. And then also communicating how I'm feeling. And when I'm feeling overwhelmed, staying consistent is key. I love it. Amazing, amazing. Guys, these are such amazing goals and amazing next steps. I love it. I love it. Beautiful. All right. I see the time. For the sake of time, I'm gonna wrap. I think you guys are, maybe gonna stick around on the Zoom, so I'll let you do that. But guys, I'm always happy to join. I'm always happy to be here with you. Reach out if you need anything. I will also send one more time. I have a lot of free blogs and videos on my site. So if you're ever like, how do I have a one-on-one with my manager, or how do I network, or anything like that, there's a lot of guidance there that you can find if you need a little extra help. And I'm sure I'll see you guys. I think in a few weeks, we're going to have some more sessions. So just know that I'm here, and I'm going to hear about how the internship went in the end. So try to keep these goals in mind because we will be meeting again. So I'll see you guys soon. Okay.
Thank you, Rachel.